episode of King Jing Things. I am King Jing. He is Mike Barnett. And today we are bringing you NFL draft hot takes. We got the NFL draft coming up tomorrow. Personally, I tell all of my loved ones that I only celebrate three, holidays every year. And that is Christmas, that is the NBA draft, and that is the NFL draft. So I am very excited about this. I have been brewing on these hot takes for quite some time. Me and Mike have done a hot take draft before where basically we're going to give you something very mild to start out with, something hot, and then something Diablo, just like maybe we don't even believe these takes, but hey, this is a safe space, I believe. Anything that is said during this 30 minutes, 1 hour podcast is, we can just forget we said it, but I feel pretty strong about a majority of these takes. How about you, Mike? How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about them. The NFL draft is literally like playing the lottery. You don't actually know what's going to happen. There's never been an analyst that's gotten every pick right. Things can change in minutes. So it'll be fun to see what we do if it comes true, if we end up being so far off base. And, I thought about making my hot takes more towards what will happen in their career, but I didn't want to make them towards what we have to wait to see. So I was kind of like, fuck it. Let me do what we can do right now. And then we can come back in like a week and you can tell me I'm a dumbass.
Exactly. This makes it a little bit easier because we're not projecting to see what happens 10 years down the line, though I will say maybe one or two of my takes do, project a little bit. But it's going to be nice to do and just get these takes off, because if we end up hitting, this is obviously something that we can hold our hats on, and be like, oh yeah, 5 years ago, I was the one that said this and it ended up being right. And if we're wrong about it, then we say, oh, it was just hot takes. We didn't really this to begin with. So it's only win-win here for us.
Agreed.
If you want to go ahead and start out with your mild take, we can go ahead and get this thing started.
Sure. So my first take, and I say it's mild just because I think it's like a 50-50 on what people think is going to happen with this, but I believe that 4 QBs will go in the first round of the draft. I think there's a lot of talk about this draft being weaker than other drafts and the QBs aren't that great, but if history says anything, quarterbacks go in the first round whether you want them to go or not. We have seen drafts in the past where quarterbacks have went in the first round, they've not panned out, and they've been terrible. So it's really hard for me to believe that all of this talk that all of these QBs are going to drop to the second round for this reason. In the last 10 years, we've seen 35 quarterbacks go in the first round. In the last 10 years, we've seen 6 quarterbacks go in the second round. There is a reason for this. Teams get nervous, they get scared, they think that the quarterback position in football is the most important position. Arguably in any sport, like having one single position be the most important, in football, quarterback is that. In the third round over the last 10 years, 11 quarterbacks have went. So I have a really hard time seeing anybody dropping to the second round. If anything, I think they're going to continue to drop to the third round, and that's because from a talent standpoint, most of the talent in this draft is at skill position or even at offensive tackle. And there's going to be a lot of picks that can come in the second round. So I think 4 quarterbacks go. And this is who I think is going to go. I think it's going to be obviously Cam Ward at 1. But where I see the trend starting is I think that the Saints end up taking Shedeur Sanders at 9. It's going to be kind of crazy because we're not seeing that right now. But I think they're going to panic and feel like they need to take a quarterback to help their franchise today. What that's going to do is immediately have other people panicking, because I think there's teams like the Browns that want to trade back in and possibly get Shedeur. There's teams like the Giants that want to trade back in and possibly get Shedeur. So I think both of those teams end up possibly trading back in and taking 2 quarterbacks. So let's say Jackson Dart was to go to the Giants. They seem to be really high on him. And then the Browns could come in and, weirdly enough, somehow Tyler Show is just getting so much love for the intangibles that he has not shown in his entire career. But in a crazy circumstance, he's going to end up going in the first round, and there's just no way that's going to work out later. The other team that I could see taking a quarterback, if it's not those 4, is the Pittsburgh Steelers. If Shedeur was to drop to them, let's say the Saints don't take him at 9 and then the Steelers take him at 21, I think that again still sets the bar of we need to go get a quarterback today, and we're going to see teams trade into the first round to get it. So my first hot take: four QBs first round.
I can see it happening for sure. You know, obviously, studying for this podcast or this video, it involved looking at a bunch of mock drafts. And for most of these mock drafts, I'm now seeing Shadur falling completely out of the second round. And I just don't necessarily believe that. Not necessarily that he is a first round talent in my eyes, but like you said, as soon as you see one quarterback get taken, all of the other teams are on alert. The minute that second quarterback takes or is taken, that's where all chaos sort of breaks loose, So I think right now, I looked at the odds and it's set at 2.5 over under quarterbacks taken. So four is a bit of a leap, but you never know what you can really believe in the reports that you're seeing. I feel like Cam Ward, that is obviously a lock at going number one in this draft. I don't see a world where Shadur actually slips out of the second round or out of the first round into the second round. You mentioned it. I think people like the Browns, like the Giants, if they like him and they have been doing their research on this guy, they will end up trading back into the first to snag one of these guys. Um, Jackson Dart, at the beginning of this off season, or I guess leading up to the draft, I feel like Jackson Dart was one of these guys that you're like, okay, I'm not going to take a QB in the first because I know he's going to be there in the third round. And now that is not the case. We have heard a bunch of rumors about Brian Dable really liking Jackson Dart. I've seen comparisons to Josh Allen, which I just do not agree with. But there are teams that are intrigued with this guy. So I see a world where he ends up getting snagged as well. And then, Jalen Milrow, he's an interesting guy here. I've had this gut feeling for about a month that he's going to end up with the Steelers. And, at that point, you have four guys. The Tyler Shuck thing is something that I just don't understand. You saw that video of him going viral. I think it was last week, maybe the week before at a pro day, and he just missed his receiver by a mile away. And obviously, you can't really determine what he's going to be just based off of that one clip that's going viral. But it certainly doesn't help your draft stock. It doesn't hurt, or it doesn't help the fact that he's always been sort of injured, um, and he's also old. He was in the same QB draft class, or not draft class, but the QB class coming into college as Trevor Lawrence, and Trevor Lawrence is a fucking veteran at this point in his career. So I think that's very telling for what you should expect with these quarterbacks. But in terms of four going in the first round, I don't think that's out of the picture. I think that's very possible.
Yeah, I think it's funny. Like uh, my thought process when it comes to the NFL is there are so many GMs that are low key stupid that like they Tyler Show is like they will see the intangibles and that's what they'll go with. They'll be like, well, he's got the size, he's got the arm strength, and they really think that stuff works, and it like never does. I mean, Anthony Richardson should be a great example. I mean, unless he suddenly turns it around in Indianapolis, he looks like he's so lost on the football field, but he was a top 10 pick. So, when you think about stuff like that, uh, and that's the best part about hot takes is it's not based on actual logic. It's based on what we see trend wise happens every year. And it's just crazy. And I will agree with you. I think Jalen Milrow has a chance to go in the first round. But again, for me personally, I don't see him being anywhere near the first round. But I think we could argue that none of these quarterbacks would have been first rounders in past drafts. So
I am actually going to go ahead and start my take, and it's going to be based off of yours right here. But my first hot take is that any of the first QBs that were taken last year would go number one in this draft. I think this is one of those draft classes for quarterbacks that when you look at it, you just see a whole bunch of glaring holes in their game. We'll start with Cam Ward. This is something that I feel like nobody's talking about, but Cam Ward has tiny hands. Fucking Kenny Pickett, a couple years back, he got so much shit for having small hands, and Cam Ward's is bigger than his. But Cam Ward has a 9-inch hand, and I feel like generally teams tend to think that QBs with a 9-inch hand or smaller, those are considered little hands. That would be the smallest of all starters in the NFL if he were to start, day one. I view that as a problem. Beyond that, he is a fifth-year senior. He can't really read defenses well, and he's willing to be overly aggressive. And that just does not. That's not a good recipe for a multi-year starter in the NFL. We go on to Shadur. Shadur takes needless sacks. He lacks a bunch of top-tier physical traits, and I feel like this is also going untalked about a bit. Do you know who his offensive coordinator was when he was in high school at Trinity Christian?
No idea.
It was this guy named Deion Sanders. Then in college, he ends up committing to Florida Atlantic until that Dion guy was named head coach of Jackson State, and then he flipped. And then we all know that him and Hunter ended up in the transfer portal, and they headed off to Colorado, where Dion got a job and was head coach. So basically, the guy in Shadur's ear and his main coach for his entire career has been his dad. And obviously, like I don't want to shit on Dion. Obviously, a lot of people in the media already have like a certain feeling about him. But I feel like it's a red flag that if you've only played for one coach almost your entire adult life, that's probably going to be a problem. Uh, you see at Shadur's stats that he's put up over the last 2 years while playing at a bigger university at Colorado. Um, I feel like he has been set up for success because of Dion. Dion was able to recruit and build a team to ensure that Shadur had the proper tools around him to make him look good and not necessarily for team success. And that's what we saw. But the thing is, we didn't see Shadur stand out in college. It's still blasphemy that he's getting his number retired. But I feel like if we changed his name from Shadur Sanders to Shadur Smith, you know, we would be looking at this guy as if he was a third round pick. But he's got some of the best PR that I guess college football has to offer, and now we're even debating him going third overall to the Giants. Though I think that's out of the question at this point in time. Uh, Jackson Dart is so similar to Shadur, except he seems to choke in the biggest moments, in the biggest games. He sort of lacks that clutch gene. He's also a smaller QB. He doesn't have that top tier size, and he's got an even weaker arm than Shadur Sanders does. It's kind of weird. It goes against his last name, but you don't really see him dart the ball in there. It's always seems like it's a little float in there, and I feel like NFL defenses are going to be able to read that pretty easily. Hot take within my hot take, Jalen Milroe might end up being the best QB in this draft. And that's also not saying much because he's not going to be better than much of these guys anyways. But point is, I think Caleb goes number one in this draft. Obviously, I think Jaden Daniels goes number one in this draft. I think Drake May goes number one in this draft, and I think you could end up convincing yourself that Michael Penix could go number one in this draft just because he's had more success in college than any of these prospects that we're talking about.
I will address this first. I do not think Milroe will be the best quarterback in this draft. I think he is terrible. I don't understand how he was. I mean, he's just not, his game's not going to fit in the NFL to me. Like, the times, like, obviously last year, that first half that he played against Georgia, he looked unbelievable. And then he played a terrible second half, arguably. And he just does that in all games. Then he tries to use his legs, and that's pretty much where he's saved. That won't work in the NFL. And I think he's just not going to have that. So I wanted to address the hot take and the hot take first. But I do agree with you in the first hot take where all of the quarterbacks from the draft last year would go number one easily in this draft because not only, I mean, they also proved it themselves in college, most of them, right? We're talking about Jaden Daniels, who led an LSU team I mean, he had the best offensive season almost ever, really, right? And that's where Cam Ward, I mean, he had such a good offensive season last season. That's why we're seeing him go number one. He proved something. Colorado proved nothing. Ole Miss proved nothing. Alabama was the worst they've been in 5 years when thinking about Milroe. Tyler Show at Louisville, like, what is he? I mean, he's had been at like four different schools going into this, and he's 25. Like, this is one of the first times where we're looking at a draft, and there's just nobody that's actually proven anything to anybody. Maybe the best quarterback that's proven that they can win is Quinn Ewers to some extent, but realistically, he's injury prone, and he's what I worry about. I think what's going to happen if I had to pick who the best quarterback's going to come out of this draft, if he gets a chance, is going to be Kyle McCord, because I don't think he was that bad at Ohio State in the first place. Ohio State told him that he was not going to be the starter the next year, so he transferred and he went to Syracuse and had one of the best Syracuse offensive seasons a quarterback's had. So, like, I think the best season since Donovan McNabb. So when you think about stuff like that, uh, I like to see success from a kid like that. He just doesn't get the recognition because he played at Syracuse. I think he could actually be a factor in a really great third round pick, realistically. But it still doesn't change that last year's draft, the quarterbacks were just so much better.
I could see McCord end up going in the third round or like one of the later rounds to like the Raiders. The Raiders, I feel like, they just traded for Geno and then signed him to an extension. But you still don't have a quarterback behind him, and I feel like Kyle McCord might be a nice little fit there where, I feel like he doesn't do anything really flashy, but he's just consistently average or good at about everything that he does. But like let him sit behind a vet for a couple years, and then you might see him pop off in a few years. I feel the same thing about Quinn Ewers as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And last hot take to your hot take of the hot take, Jordan Travis would have went above every single one of these quarterbacks this year too.
Oh man.
That's totally biased. I don't really care, but he's better than all of them. He just happened to get hurt.
What you got for your second hot take? We're calling this just hot.
So I believe that Ashton Jeanty will either drop to the Bears at 10 or they will make a move to draft him. Most likely, if they're going to make a move, the team that I see being willing to trade up to them would be the Jaguars at 5, because everybody is pretty much saying that the Raiders are taking Jeanty at 6. I just think there's enough pieces that could happen that changes that. And I think that everything I'm seeing is the Chicago Bears love Ashton Jeanty. They want Jeanty. And I think that the running game would put Caleb Williams in a position to succeed way more. The Chicago Bears have made all the right moves so far in the offseason to be a good team going into this new year. Now, granted, as somebody that's watched the Chicago Bears since I was a kid pretty intently, I almost doesn't matter what you do to build that team. They just somehow learn to fail. It's kind of crazy. Um, but I would love to see the Chicago Bears be a successful team. And I think bringing somebody that's going to pound in the running game is going to take so much pressure off of their star quarterback, Caleb Williams, and they need to make it happen, whatever it takes. I don't think there is like they could give up a second or third round pick, whatever. Like, I don't know. They need to move up to 5.
I think that makes sense. I definitely don't think he'll be there at 10 because I mean we talked about it. This whole draft is a bit lackluster, just in terms of talent in general, at least top end talent. And I do think Ashton Jeanty is one of the top three guys in this draft. Obviously, he's a running back, so uh, historically, you don't see a lot of teams want to use that top end draft capital that they've got to make that pick on a running back. That being said, we saw what the Lions did last year. I think they may have traded back, but if they traded up, they snagged Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round, and now we've got the offensive coordinator from that team, Ben Johnson, as the head coach for the Bears. So I've heard the Bears love him. There have been three teams that claim they love Genty and believe that he will end up, being the biggest change to their offense. Of those three teams, I believe one of them is just smokescreen. I think one of these teams are actually dumb enough to convince themselves that Genty can succeed there, even though they have no offensive line. And then there's the realistic place of Genty being able to immediately thrive in their offense, and that team is the Bears. There has been a lot of smoke on Twitter over the last 24 hours about the Bears wanting to trade up with the Jags, and we'll just have to see if that happens. But if Ben Johnson has any sort of say over the pick, and I'm sure he does, I'd expect them to at least float the idea and make the calls and see what it would take. I believe they would be switching their first round pick, and then maybe throwing in a second. And the Jaguars would be dumb not to accept that offer. I don't think they actually want Genty. I believe it's smokescreen just to sort of trade up or drive up that trade value there. But if I was a betting man, I'd put good money on the Genty ending up with the Bears. But if you were to have asked me that a week ago, I would have told you the Raiders. So that kind of just shows how much I know.
Yeah, I think there's a part of me that actually feels like the Raiders was looking at it as a smokescreen too, because I think there's a lot of help that they could use on their team. And if they're going to bring Geno Smith in, like they should go offensive line or they should do something like Max Crosby can't do it alone. I'm sure he doesn't want to do it alone. They're lucky he's even on the team still at this point. So like they have a lot of pieces that they need to fill in. Do I think running back is one of them, but Ginty just to me doesn't fit in Las Vegas the way he does with Chicago. So he will end up being a Bear. How it happens, I'm not sure. But, when I think about it personally, like, even though Ginty had such a great season, like, I still don't think he's as versatile as somebody like Bijan Robinson, who went 8 to the Falcons. So, like, if he was to drop, I think people would be surprised because it doesn't feel like there's as much talent, but he's still a running back in the NFL. So he could drop just based on how things have gone past years.
Yeah, I think it historically goes back to wanting to spend top end draft capital on a running back, but there are definitely teams that have that crazy voice in their war room saying like, "Hey, make the trade, hey, make the pick," So anything's possible. I don't see Genty going past 10, but it's that 5 spot that you're really looking at, and between 5 and 10, anything could happen.
Absolutely.
My hotter take is going to be this is more of a projection. 10 years down the line, we're going to look back at this draft and we're going to say, yeah, Emeka Egbuka is obviously the best wide receiver from this draft class. I feel like the dude is getting overlooked heavily because of the Travis Hunters, because of the Tet McMillans, and even recently we've seen a lot of love coming for Matthew Golden. He has shot up people's draft boards as well. I don't think Egbuka projects to have a very high ceiling just because he's not really elite at anything that he does. But that also doesn't matter because everything that he does do, it's at an above average rate. He's not necessarily the fastest guy out there, but he's still quick. He's not the biggest guy out there, but he's still big. The dude's got very reliable hands. He's got solid route running, and there's no glaring issues that you see in this draft prospect. So I feel like in the first round, a lot of teams typically try to draft for high ceilings, and they don't really look at the floor. But this guy has the highest floor out of any receiver in this draft. You think of guys like Chris Godwin out of Tampa, or even JSN, an old Ohio State guy. I feel like those are those guys that you should sort of compare him to. They will never he won't be a top 10 wide receiver in the entire league. But if we're talking about unbustable, this is your guy. He'll be around, he'll end up having a very long career. But most importantly, he's going to be reliable, game in and game out. So yeah, I think he'll end up being the best wide receiver from this class, and that does include Travis Hunter.
See, I do 100% disagree with you on this one. And although I think Tet McMillan is bustable, like it's possible, I just think he's going to be an arm and a leg better than every single wide receiver in this draft. I think he is the next Mike Evans. What he was able to do at Arizona, like if you go back and watch his highlight tape, and Connor and I have done this multiple times because we're just in awe of this guy, and he's so big. I haven't seen a wide receiver like him in 5 years, in my opinion. He, I'm not going to call him Calvin Johnson or anything like that, but I think he has the potential to do things that those guys did on the field. And that's why I think Mike Evans really is the perfect comparison because he just goes up and gets the ball. He has everything you want in size and speed, maybe a little bit slower than you'd like, but he still gets there. And I don't think he's ever really had a great quarterback throwing to him, and he still has put on some of the best college football games we've seen from a wide receiver. Where he really doesn't get the love, I think, and this is just how it works, is like he's just on the West Coast, and nobody's staying up till 10 o'clock to watch a lot of these games that they might be playing. But I think if he was more accessible in his time as a wide receiver, like for us to watch, people would agree almost that I actually think he would go higher than what he's projected to go. I think he would unanimously be the number one. But I've also heard some things that there might be an attitude issue. I don't know if that's true. Again, I've just seen some things about that. But yeah, personally, I think he's going to end up being the best. But I would agree that Egbuka is like less chance to be a bust. But I'm just putting all my cards behind Ted.
Yeah, I've seen Tet be compared to Mike Evans just because of the height on him. I've also seen him compared to our guy Drake London, as well as T. Higgins. So the ceiling is definitely there for somebody like him. I feel like his knock recently has been the comments about him not watching football, him not watching tape, and that just goes back to, does he love this game? If you draft him, is he going to want to be a part of your franchise for the next decade, or is this going to be something where he sort of gets his bag and then gives up on his dream of being in the NFL? You get there, you've achieved your dream. That's it for him. I don't know if he wants to be great. I don't know if that's something that you know is ingrained in him. He's got all of the intangible, or he's got all the tangibles, I should say. He's big. He's got a very big catch radius. He's got decent footwork. It's just whether or not he wants to be there, and I think that's my biggest question about him. I was so high on him throughout the entire draft process, so I feel like this has probably changed within the last week or two. Uh, but I'm sticking with my take. And again, if it's wrong, then hey, it's a hot take.
Yeah, I think realistically, like if he, you know, I don't necessarily think you have to watch a ton of football. I mean, you need to watch tape, obviously. Like that's really important. That could change when he gets to the next level. Again, it just kind of goes back like, playing at Arizona, it feels like there's times where you're not playing for anything. Like I know they got pretty close to playing the Big 12 championship, or maybe they did play in the Big. No, they didn't. Arizona State did. But you think about things like that. Arizona doesn't bring the same vibe as your Ohio State, your Georgia's, your Southeast football. And I could see somebody not feeling as strongly there. But once you get to the league, you have to make a choice. You either got to do it or you don't. And I'm hoping that he'll find the NFL draft to be a really great experience and he'll get in first day and see what it's going to take to be successful. I'm putting all my cards behind that. So one of us is going to be wrong for sure, or both of us possibly.
Yeah,
But
well, we could both be wrong. Maybe Travis Hunter is just the best wide receiver that we've ever seen.
totally
Uh,
possible.
but similar to like where you said, like it's kind of where he's coming out of college. That's why he might not necessarily be viewed a certain way. I feel like it also depends on where he lands. I've seen a lot of stuff about the Jaguars really liking him, and I think that's why the moving back from 5 to 10 with the Bears is probably best for both teams. I think McMillan would end up being there, but I don't know if I like that as a landing spot for him necessarily. You're immediately going in there, and you don't know if you're going to be the number one or the number two guy. You would probably not be the number one guy just based on how Brian Thomas had his season last year. He was probably the best wide receiver to come out of that class. So going back to back wide receiver picks is definitely an interesting choice. But I feel like at that point the Jags are sort of just building around Trevor Lawrence and just getting him all of the tools they need to make him make that first overall pick for him kind of like validated. So I think it all depends on like where you end up landing, but I stick with my take.
Yeah, I think Trevor Lawrence, fully healthy, uh, would love to have somebody like Ted McMillan on his team, and to have two actual threats at wide receiver would boost the Jaguars' offense. And I think that is really something that they need to do immediately. So I would totally love to see that. And I think there is an excitement about, even if it's in Jacksonville, being in Florida, let's see if that changes anything for him. My last hot take, and I think is would technically be my hottest, I guess, just based on everything that's going on, is I think Josh Simmons from Ohio State will be one of the first three offensive tackles off the board. I wanted to say he's going to be the first offensive tackle off the board, but the Patriots are pretty much sold on Will Campbell, so that's just not going to happen. But I think especially over the last couple days, and all the health reports are saying that he's in great shape. His knee looks good, which is obviously what he injured last year, and it's really important to see that. And I know injuries scare people, but I think realistically, at fully healthy, he's the best offensive tackle in the draft. It's not even close. There's a lot of teams that are really excited to see that. And if I had to pick where he was going to go, if the Cowboys can't trade up for whatever they're thinking, I think they will end up trading back, and I think they will take him off the board uh, a little bit earlier than we think. I don't know exactly who I think is going to trade up with the Cowboys yet, but he would probably be my landing spot there, and I think it's gonna be one of the top three offensive tackles.
It's definitely doable, you know. Like you mentioned, he's coming off of a season-ending injury. So I think at this point in time, we don't know if he's going to be 100% at the start of the season. But that being said, you look at the production that he had in 2023 and the half of the season that he played in 2024, he only allowed one sack during his stint there, and that's going up against Big Ten talent. Uh, he's what you want in an offensive tackle. He's physically, you know, he just physically what you want. He's very athletic. He's got very quick feet, and he's shown his ability against top tier talent. It's not like you're taking him from a smaller school and you can say, hey, like he didn't play up against anybody. The only things that you can really mark on this guy is the fact that he did get injured, so you don't know if he's going to be there at the start of the season, and he's got a little bit of a problem with penalties being called on him. But like, if you're a team that isn't necessarily ready to compete right away, or you have a lot of talent on the offensive line, which isn't that many teams in the NFL, you might be willing to take a flyer on a guy like this and it work out in your favor. Uh, you mentioned it. You wanted to go the first tackle off of the board here, but it does seem like the Patriots are pretty locked into Will Campbell. So I believe if Simmons wasn't coming into the season injured, he would end up being this pick over Will Campbell here, just because we've seen a lot of question marks on his size and his ability at the professional level here. Um, Top three is definitely a bit of a reach. I've seen a lot of rumors about Kevin Banks Jr. out of Texas. He's flying up a lot of people's boards. I've seen some people think that Josh Connerly Jr. out of Oregon is actually the best offensive tackle in this entire draft. So with Josh Simmons being a top three pick, I think he's got the talent to be there. Uh, Whether these teams actually executed and are willing to sort of wait on him for a second to get fully healthy, that I guess that's the biggest question here.
Yeah, I think there are some teams that just really need somebody like him. And, you brought up the penalties, which I totally understand. But I think once the offenses run a little bit more by the quarterback in the NFL, he'll get a better grasp of silent counts and things like that. And he'll be able to work on that immediately. And then, yeah, it is tough because when you think about it, like, injuries always have people drop in the draft. It's just the nature of the beast, and it's understandable because you don't know. But I think in years past, we've seen it where guys are fully healthy, they come in their first season, they get hurt, and then what's the difference? If you hear that he's having a good recovery and he has everything that you're looking for, I would be willing to take a stab at it, in those in that anything after 10 but before 20. I feel like you're kind of the value is just kind of going down after the top 3 picks this year, at least according to everybody else. So I think it would be worth the choice because if you miss out on him in 10 years, you might really regret it.
Right. And like you're probably getting him for a bargain regardless of where he goes. Because obviously, like we said, we know that Campbell's gonna more than likely go forward to the Patriots. We've seen Mimbu out of Missouri. He seems to be the second guy off the board almost consensusly. But he's got a bunch of question marks himself. We don't know. He's got the tangibles. We don't know if he has the intangibles. So don't know if he's going to end up succeeding there. Uh, Josh Simmons probably has the most amount of talent out of any of these guys besides maybe Will Campbell here. But yeah, if he is the fifth tackle taken off the board, then you're definitely getting a quality pick there. Whether he breaks that top three in offensive tackles being taken, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of teams like the Ravens specifically and the Chiefs have both come out and said like when he drops to them, they're going to be really excited. And again, I think that just could turn into as soon as you hit draft day, everything changes. You start hearing like, oh, like oh, well, I thought I was going to give him in the second round, and then people just start reaching for everybody. We see it every year, and I'm kind of thinking that's what's going to happen here.
I could see it happening for sure. All right. For my hottest take, Travis Hunter will be a NFL bust. He is not going to find success in the NFL. Uh, in parentheses, where you are drafting him. I will start this out by saying I do believe that Travis Hunter is sort of capitalizing on an all around weak draft class by being a guy who can theoretically play on both sides of the ball. We've seen it in college. He obviously takes a ton of snaps when he's with Colorado. But no one wants to talk about it, but I feel like there's no way that he's going to end up playing full time on both sides of the ball at the professional level. It's just more physically grueling than a college season. You're going up against professional athletes on a week to week basis. You're not going up against, lollipop teams that Colorado has paid $1 million just so they can get an extra win on their calendar. When you're playing at the NFL level for that long and you only get 1 week off, then, I think that's just going to wear on you a lot different than you are in college. Nor should he necessarily want to play both sides of the ball at the professional level, because you're getting a buy one get one special with him where you're paying him $7 to $10 million a year, and he's playing, I think on average it's like 500 to 700 snaps on both sides of the ball. So you're paying him $7 million a year for 1,200 snaps a year. That doesn't make sense to me if I'm Travis Hunter. I mentioned before it's going to be a grueling season. I feel like injuries are going to be plentiful if you're playing that much, and teams aren't going to necessarily want to risk that, especially if you're the Browns taking him at the number 2 overall pick. You see the current landscape of what the NFL looks like right now, and you look at the top 5 receivers getting paid. And if you take those averages of the top 5, they're making about $39 million. If you look at the top 5 paid cornerbacks in the league, on average, they're making $23 million. So I expect that his agent is going to be smart enough to say, hey, man, you should probably just focus on being a wide receiver at the professional level. And maybe you go out there and, you're a slot corner. You might be the cornerback 3 out there for certain plays. But I wouldn't want to play both sides of the ball at that sense. I feel like it makes sense more financially long term for him to just focus on a wide receiver or being a wide receiver rather than a cornerback. Even though personally, I see him being a better corner in the draft than a wide receiver. So if I'm projecting that he's only playing a wide receiver, why would you use the top 3 pick on a wide receiver? That is literally unheard of. You don't see people using that much or that high of draft capital to take a wide receiver. As a wide receiver, he's got a limited route running tree. He typically only runs outside vertical routes. You can tell that his techniques are very underdeveloped because he's spending half of his time also learning to play cornerback. He's limited physically. He has a very, very small frame. And I feel like the most absurd thing out of all of this is sometime between the beginning of last season, college, and right now, we have just decided as like the consensus of draft experts that the closest comparison that Travis Hunter is Justin Jefferson, and you're comparing him to a top three wide receiver in the league right now. That is absurd. I just don't see that comparison. It's one thing that is certain about Travis Hunter is that he's an athletic freak, and he's got an above average 40 time. When Justin Jefferson was coming into the league, his biggest critique was that he wasn't fast enough. So right there, they're already wrong. You can compare their frames a little bit as they both weren't like the biggest guys coming into the NFL. But like I mentioned above, Travis Hunter has a very limited route running ability right now. And Justin Jefferson was very, very polished as a route runner coming into the league. He was very technically sound. Uh, so I feel like at the end of the day, it is a problem to use a top three draft pick on a guy who can, theoretically play on both sides of the ball. But the first thing that you say about the guy is his endurance and his versatility. It's not, oh, he's really elite at this. I just don't see it in him. That being said, there is a chance that he finds success at the professional level. This is a hot take. I don't expect people to agree with me on this, but I feel like playing both sides of the ball has been beneficial to his draft stock, but it's not going to be beneficial for a long, successful NFL career.
I think realistically, if you love the game and you want to play forever, like why would you play both sides of the ball? And the rumors coming out that he supposedly told teams like, if I'm not playing both sides of the ball, I just won't play. Well, there's an attitude issue if you ask me. Like you think you're just better than every single other player in the league. I would love to see you walk in a locker room and tell all of the players that you're playing with and have that attitude, because that's going to be a really big wake up call. And I don't think Travis Hunter is the most egotistical guy by any means. I've seen him do his streams and I've seen him on TV and talk about stuff. And I hope that's not how he is. But if that is the case, that's just not going to go well. I agree with you on everything that you're saying. Um, except for the fact that I think if he just decides to play on one side of the ball, I think he is a kid that's willing to put in the work and be successful. I guess my biggest issue, especially when it comes to wide receiver, is because he's so much smaller. Like you said, comparing him to Justin Jefferson is so stupid. Like that's not even funny. I think he's like 6 inches shorter than him. Justin Jefferson just does things at the wide receiver position that we haven't even seen before. And to think Travis Hunter's going to do the same thing, like it's not going to happen. Let's also go back and look at the players he was playing against in the Big 12. Like we don't look at any of those players as that elite in the first place, right? Who do you think he's going to just outrun some of these cornerbacks in the league today or put them in? I mean, if he can't run a route efficiently like we're talking about, what makes us think that he's going to? I mean, he's not Tyreek Hill, right? Like I just have a really hard time thinking that he is worth the second round pick or the second pick in the draft too. Um, and I have a disgust towards Travis Hunter because he ditched Florida State, and I'm a Florida State fan, so obviously that hurts me. But realistically, I think he can have success if he gets the ego out of his head right now, picks a position and goes and plays it, but it doesn't necessarily make the second pick worth it.
Exactly. I feel like if he decides to commit to being a full-time cornerback with maybe a couple packages, drawn up for him on the offensive side of the ball, he can end up being a top five cornerback in this league when maybe not when it's all said and done, but like, in current NFL, there will be a few seasons where he's ending up, as a top five cornerback. I feel like as a wide receiver, we just have so much more talent over there. It's going to be very hard for him to sort of, live up to the amount of hype that we have given this guy. Like we use the word generational prospect, but it's not because he's good at one particular thing. It's because he has starting potential on both sides of the ball. And that's not very generational, especially if you're considering that he will have to pick one side of the ball or not. I'm sure, uh, we're expecting the Browns to pick him at 2 unless somebody like trades up and gives up a massive haul for the guy. But like, I don't see him going to the Browns and being successful there. It's probably one of the worst landing spots that he could have gone to, either the Browns or the Giants. Like that kind of just sucks for him. If he There was a little bit of rumors of him falling down to the Patriots at 4, and I'm like, okay, like he might be able to break out there, but with the Browns, I just feel like it's really easy to fall short in terms of what your expectations are. I don't think they're really good at building talent that they have in the building. So I just don't know if I see Travis Hunter truly succeeding, immediately. I think it all depends on where you land. And unfortunately, I don't think he's landing with a very good franchise here.
Yeah, I don't even think you have to say from what you've seen on the Browns. I mean, our whole lives, the Browns have sucked pretty much, right? And everybody that's gone there has not done well. That's not to say that Travis Hunter's not the guy that in 4 years, as soon as that contract's up, he's going to go somewhere else, and he'll probably still somehow be really polarizing at that point just because of where he started and what he's done. But I'm also really curious to see, like, if he does struggle in his first year, right? If he struggles on both sides of the ball, how is he going to take it mentally? Because the spotlight's going to be on him. And I think that's something that we don't talk about enough uh, when we think about the culture of sports. Is like, there are guys in the NFL that have great careers, play 10 to 15 years, let's say, and are not talked about, right? They're like, oh, yeah, we knew he was really good, but, it's just, he was just another guy on the field. But the guys that become polarizing, and Travis Hunter is going to be one of those guys, we need to see first how he's going to be able to handle it mentally because you've come in with the ego now. I'm really curious to see how you handled that, especially playing on a Browns team that could go, who knows, they could go 2-14 this year. And part of that's going to be on you, even though I know for myself that's not going to be only his problem. It's going to be a team's problem, but he's going to have to be a leader there, uh, even though he's really not a leader there because he hasn't even been in the league yet. But that's just the way that the mind works and the way that social media works. People are going to get after him if he's not the greatest thing since sliced bread. So good luck to him. I don't want to see anybody fail, obviously. I know you don't either, but it's just those are not shoes that I would want to fill myself.
Right. Also, like looking at it, who's throwing him the ball if he's playing wide receiver for the Browns? Like Deshaun Watson's not. They just got Joe Flacco and they've got Kenny Pickett. So I mean, hey, this is one of those prime candidates of the Browns wanting to trade back into the first round, and maybe they snag Shadur Sanders. They've been attached to their hip almost their entire collegiate career. Um, but if I do that and I'm the Browns, or I guess if I'm Kevin Stefanski and the opportunity is to trade up into the first round and get Shadur Sanders to pair with them, I'm pushing against that as much as possible because the minute that you don't see Shadur Sanders succeed, which again we just talked about it, we neither of us see him succeeding in the NFL. But the minute that Shadur Sanders isn't succeeding and Travis Hunter isn't succeeding, the first thought that everybody is going to go to, whether it's the fans at home, whether it's the media that you're seeing on TV, is, they should fire Kevin Stefanski and bring in Deion Sanders.
Yep.
That would be the first thing that they talk about.
Guess what? That's not going to work.
Nope.
Sorry.
And unfortunately for Travis Hunter, he's going number 2 overall. It seems like he's going to get the spotlight as if he was the first overall pick. He's going to have the spotlight on him the entire season. Everything that he does is going to be, looked under with a magnifying glass. They're going to critique him on absolutely everything. And I don't know. I'm not spending a number 2 pick on him. If I was the Browns, I would rather pair Miles Garrett up with Abdul Carter and just have a fantastic defensive line, you know. But from all that we've seen online, it does seem like he is going to end up going to the Browns, and again, one of the worst spots that I think he could have landed to have a successful career. So, hopefully I'm wrong. I would love to be able to see this guy come into the league and be able to play both sides of the ball at an elite level. I've had people say no matter what side of the ball he goes to, he's going to end up top three on either side. I've even heard that this guy is going to end up being the best player that we have ever seen in the NFL. I just have trouble seeing that. Maybe I'm just looking through it in a negative, you know, point of view, uh, because he's got skills and intangibles that you can't teach, but
Yeah, I mean, realistically, the people that say the GOAT of the NFL is Tom Brady. He was a sixth round pick, 199, right? That was his pick. So like, I think it's funny for anybody to look at a draft and say that guy's going to go and be the greatest we've ever seen. Like, that's just we just don't know that. We've never I don't there's really not that many guys that have come out and just suddenly become the greatest. Like I just have such a hard time saying that, but I think there's only one real winner here from Travis Hunter going to, and it's Cam Ward because it has been so quiet. He's everybody just like, oh, he's going number one, so he's just quiet. What a perfect situation for him to go into the season, number one, first pick overall, and somehow the headlines aren't even going to be about him. What a genius. I mean, this is going to work out really well for the Titans. Like, if Cam Ward struggles or whatever that looks like, it is what it is. But I think the headlines are going to be soft on him because there's other people that they're focused on, and he's going to end up being the real winner of this draft, regardless if he ends up being great.
I'd agree. You don't have as much pressure as you do. You have you're the number one pick, but you're not being propped up as this generational talent. That's the guy behind you, and even Abdul Carter is sort of getting that little hype as well. So you're surrounded by two very hyped prospects, and I don't know. You're also on Tennessee, and nobody ever talks about the Titans, So you could go and you could just have the worst career or the worst year that you've ever had in your entire career, and it'll probably be talked about minimally because even if he sucks, then everybody's going to be like, well, yeah, like we knew this draft class was going to suck.
Yep.
Nobody liked any of the quarterbacks in this draft class. So, I feel like yeah, you're right. He's the real winner of this draft.
Agreed.
Well, those were our hot takes. Let us know how you feel about them. I'm asking for you to come argue with me in the comments. I've been trying to pick this fight on Twitter. I've been trying to pick this fight with my friends. It's just something that I feel very strongly about. I feel strongly about all of these arguments that we've made here. So yeah, come find me. Come find me in the comments. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell Mike he's wrong.
Yeah, bring it on.
But don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and maybe we'll do a post-draft sort of winner and loser video. I think that would probably be pretty fun to do. We can see if, the Browns trade back into the first round and snag Shadur Sanders. Maybe Sanders falls into the second round and the Browns grab him there. I personally would like to see them link up in the NFL. I think storyline, that's pretty cool, but that might just be the WWE fan in me.
Yep, no, that's what it is, I think. And but realistically, if Shadur dropped to the second round and the Browns got him there, we're looking at it differently. That's
Right.
the funny part, and that's 14 picks difference, but yet somehow in our minds we have been built to look at it completely different. So, yeah, is what it is. That's the sport.
That's the NFL for you. But yeah, like, subscribe, leave a comment, and we will see you guys next time. Peace.